Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. Do you ever meet those people and just get into the deep, rich conversation, the total opposite of small chat immediately? Because that was my experience with today's guest for you, Breanna, founder of the Mind School, which you'll learn all about in a second. And we did not leave a supportive stone unturned in talking about her experience building her business and all the growth and challenges that has come with it. We really got into it in this one. You're going to hear about embracing the performer within, why we have to look so closely at our money stories, reframing the power of selling, learning to choose your hard. I know you'll feel that one deep in your bones. How different our businesses look at the beginning. The loneliness we can experience in online businesses, building ethically in an unregulated industry, and the benefits of a part-time job in business building. That last point, the one about the part-time job, it comes in right at the end of the episode, and it is such a powerful conversation. I can't wait for you to hear. I think this point matters for us when we're thinking about a pivot or a change, figuring out a way to reduce scarcity sensation, be it by having a part-time gig or picking up some extra work, full-time or otherwise, whatever your structure of work and income looks like. I just think it's a really valuable headspace and something that often gets missed in the business building conversation. And it's something that could be important at any stage. Lastly, I hope you'll mind a few cheeky background woofs from our resident doggos. We are, in fact, real people making a real podcast, and the dogs, well, they're real too. I know you'll forgive me for showing up done over perfect and my editing skills, keeping the doggos in there where I needed to. So especially given the quality of this story. So let's get you into it. I'm here with Breanna May, founder of the Mind School, a one-of-a-kind certification to become a highly skilled, highly acclaimed coach, teacher, and leader. The Mind School method is the place for humans who work with humans, where you can learn how to build your personal and professional power and success from the inside out. Breanna helps people see past the fear and self-sabotage that holds them back and teaches the practical toolkit needed to up-level coaching skills and create a reputation that every client is raving about. Her Mind School method is centered around three key pillars: mindset and neuro-linguistic programming, shadow work and emotional embodiment, and influence and rapport. And with terms twice a year, the Mind School program is held over 6 or 7 day immersion where you can learn the techniques and the tools in mindset and emotional intelligence and leave with a newfound confidence. It's a business born after feeling frustrated by the education system she was working within, which now sees Breanna training, teaching, speaking, and hosting a pod. The process of stepping outside industry norms and into the storm of crafting what you're offering and what your days look like at that point for sure have brought some learning. So let's get into them. Breanna, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I was listening to your podcast this morning, walking my dog, and I thought, this is something I wish I knew existed 4 years ago when I started, and now at every single phase. So I'm really excited to have this chat.
Oh, thank you. Absolute music to my ears because it's exactly what I needed too. There's people keeping it goddamn real because it is hard out here.
Yeah.
So tell me how, I know you know this question is coming because it's a fun one. How would your best friend describe you?
This is funny. The reason I laughed when I heard this question, because I realized my initial response was, depends which friend you ask. And then I thought, okay, but there would be themes. So I've got like my friends that I went to uni with, which is a very different vibe, to my business friends now and my high school friends. And I'm so blessed to have a big group of friends, and they're so diverse, which is such a reflection of me as a very, very diverse and contradictory human. And I think that's what they would say. Like I'm a bit confusing, can't quite be put in a box, but I think the common thread that they would all say is that I'm the glass half full person and I'm the curious person, bit of a laugh, like to keep things pretty, I don't take too much too seriously. And the contradiction to that is I'm quite a deep thinker and I love knowledge. So I think they would say a little bit of a nerd, but also don't put her in that box, and very optimistic.
I think, they've got some kindred spirit aspects there with contradictions is something that I have heard quite a lot through my life as well. I have a funny friend I'm thinking of who describes me as like the bogan with a Chanel handbag. Like,
Oh my God, yes, I feel that. I've been described as part bogan, part Barbie. And I'm like, yes, that actually rings so true to me.
it does, for me, except for the Chanel handbag part, which I don't actually own one, but it was more
No.
of a metaphorical Chanel handbag. Before we get into, the mind school method and who you are today, I'd love you to tell me a little bit more about who you were before all this.
Oh, that's a big question. I was a teacher, but before that, I actually finished uni with a law degree and a journalism degree. And before that, I was going down the path of musical theatre. So you can sort of see where all of my contradictions and it was confusion and frustration, to be honest. It was spending my 20s being perpetually frustrated that I had all of these seemingly contradictory passions and I didn't know how to put them together and I couldn't find the job title that fit. It was like I did the law degree, I found myself in the law firm being like, well, I don't really want what the senior partners have. This doesn't feel like I'm being creative enough. It doesn't feel like I get to be free enough. I really value freedom. So I was like, this isn't really it. And I did journalism at the same time. So I was like, oh, I love radio. I loved radio and I loved that sort of aspect of it, but I didn't love the lifestyle because it was, news is 24/7 and you've really got to sacrifice your whole life for it. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for travel, which I loved at the time. So I was really frustrated. I think that's who I was in my 20s. I was trying to put it all together and figure it out. And because I've always, the common thread has been learning, the common thread has been education. I've always loved it. And then travel was also part of my soul at that stage in my 20s. Travel was such a big part of who I was. And so I sort of dabbled in law, decided not to follow through after I graduated, dabbled in journalism, did a bit of that, and then thought, you know what? I want to have 12 weeks holiday a year so I can keep traveling. That's my honest truth. I just thought that'll be good. That'll be good for traveling. I like teaching. I think I like kids. And so I ended up as a high school teacher. And that honestly, I feel like was divine intervention. And looking back now, it was the best thing I think that ever happened to me, even though I didn't set out to, I didn't grow up saying I want to be a teacher. It was where I really found my heart and where I also found my rage and my passion. And that sort of became how my business grew. And now looking back, my business is all of the little pieces actually fitting together perfectly. But it was who I was really just trying to figure it all out.
So very relatable, I'm sure, for so many people. I just wrote down heart and rage because I just think that alone is such an interesting space to explore. That, like, when passion sneaks up on you, you're like, I love this, but oh, it's so annoying when this goes wrong and I can see this happening and I can see you get this kind of deep obsession almost with the space that you're in. But the other thing I found really interesting about, not that I'm here to psychologize you, but it's more general than this, I promise. But it surprises me how many people who have a little bit of a love for some kind of like musical theatre or dance or, something like that when they're younger, who then kind of end up in performative roles later on. And, I would put performative roles as anybody who is speaking, if for myself, showing up here as a podcast host, all of us who have to show up in reels and TikToks all bloody day, but more specifically that, if you're training or doing workshops and things like that, like there's a real element to performance with a lot of different types of businesses. And yeah, it's just, I think, a point that perhaps someone else will relate to go like, oh, like I remember little baby Kim, she was like the jazz ballet superstar when she was younger. She wanted to be, wanted to get the best parts and kind of lost, lost a bit of that somewhere. I think I dipped out of that in high school drama, but now I love to show up here and have a conversation with you.
I think that lots of people would resonate with that. And I'm so glad you sort of pointed that out because it is performative. And there's so many of us that were like that, what I've found, so many of the women that I have worked with were that girl, were the, oh my gosh, stage and performance, and they love music. And then they got told they were too much at some point. So part of my story also has been reclaiming the too muchness, because it's funny as you were saying that. I think that if you had have said a few years ago, oh, you're performative, I would have taken that as an insult. I would have been like, oh gosh, that feels ingenuous. And I had to do so much work to reclaim the part of me that actually was, I was called a show pony when I was little because I did. I loved the microphone. I wanted the same as you. I wanted to be the lead. I wanted to be the soloist in the choir. And I had to really reclaim that sense of, you know what? I do love performance. I do love the stage. I do love all of those pieces. And I guess take away the shame from that. And I've found the more I've shared that, the more women are like, oh my gosh, same. I was too much, or I was a bit of a show pony, or I liked it, but here I am and I actually want to reclaim it.
Oh, I could just dine out on this topic with you all day because you're so right about the shame piece. There's, work that we do when we go through, personal growth and entrepreneurship, forever interconnected. But when we start to look at some of those driving forces of what is behind the things that we want to create, no matter how they change, they bring out little things and you think, oh, that's uncomfortable. And it's like, what is the story that's behind that? One of my sort of core principles, there's a manifestation woo-ness behind this. So I'll leave that for a podcast for another day. But one of the aspects that kind of drives me is being seen. And, that was filled with such shame as well as you described. But I think it is about reframing that to be like, well, when we're able to speak and when we're able to quote unquote perform, to show up, we're able to teach others, we're able to connect, we're able to offer something to somebody else that makes them feel better about their life. Like there's so much positivity to taking on performative type roles within our own businesses, particularly if you've got an important message to share, which it absolutely sounds like you do.
Yeah, such a good point. And it's like, we don't look at Beyonce or Taylor Swift and go, show pony, performer. It's like that's their superpower. And it's the same for the entrepreneurs, the business owners that get lit up in that performative role. That's their gift.
Absolutely. So let's get back to the space before we go on the world's biggest tangent about this, because I definitely could. But when you were, in that role and you were kind of in that heart and rage equal space and you were teaching and you were educating, I can't imagine the stories you must have about high school students, but again, we'll leave that for another day. But how and when did you start planning your exit from that traditional high school teaching space? And like what prompted it?
It was about 2019, probably a little bit before then, but 2019, I'd been sort of pivoting. I was a senior English teacher. So I was teaching, literature and Shakespeare and all of this. And some of it I loved. I loved teaching the kids debates and, how to have these really deep philosophical conversations. I loved it. But then I started to get sort of through my own putting my hand up more into a well-being space with the kids and talking to them more about what was going on in their heart and what was going on outside of the classroom and the grades. And I was really loving that pastoral role with the kids. And luckily, I was put into a role where I was given a whole year just to work with my year 9 girls for a whole year. Every single Wednesday they'd come in and it was like all rules gone. Forget the rules, take off your tie, get comfortable, tell me what's on your heart. And I had this horrible sort of experience one morning where so many of the girls, we were talking about body image, we were talking about pressure, we were talking about what's going on at home. And I had half the class crying, half of them really sharing some things that they hadn't shared before. One who said, nobody knows this, but my parents are going through a really messy divorce. And I was their English teacher at the same time. And I actually thought, wow, that's interesting because their grades are actually reflecting what they're telling me. And then the bell went. And I thought, well, wipe up your tears, please, because we've got an exam next. And you've got to basically wipe this up. And also I've got 3 other classes waiting for me. I've got the photocopier that's jammed. I've got stuff to do after work. I need to get my stuff done, the reports done. And I sort of was like, actually, this isn't it for me anymore. I want to stay with them and talk about these things on their heart, their emotions. And then I started to think, actually, their emotional intelligence is directly related to their academic results. And I was sort of like, I think there's something in this. And so I went more down that path as a teacher. And at the same time, I was starting to have my own sort of, my babies at the time, they were the year 12 class and I'd taught them for 5 years by this point. They were graduating. And I was doing the big motivational speech before they left, don't you ever settle for anything other than your dreams. You have to go for it. Promise me you'll do what you want and not what everyone else says to do. And you'll go for your dreams and you'll just do it. And I love these kids so much. And one of them looked at me and he said, Miss, did you always dream of being a teacher? And my heart, like I had this moment of, oh my gosh, no, I actually didn't. And that feels really hard to say out loud because I love you guys, but I also want to be a role model. And I want a role model to you chasing your dreams. And I haven't. And so it was all this beautiful timing where I was like, actually, I'm raging about the system because the system is so broken. I'm looking at these kids telling them to chase their dreams and realizing that I hadn't yet. And so in 2020, when those students graduated, I graduated with them and we decided to chase our dreams together. And I just went on this whole journey of figuring out how we can nurture emotional intelligence to create long lasting success, whatever that means for the individual.
So much power in that projection of self in that moment, like that person who said that to you, projecting that back on. It's like, wow, what a mirror to have held up. I think there's probably lots of mirror moments that we don't notice or we don't see, and then there's those ones that give us that little push. That's a pretty powerful one.
It was so powerful. I felt my heart drop actually. I was like, oof, oh, this is really hurting my ego because here I am telling the kids to go for their dreams and it's so easy. You talk to younger people and children especially, like you can do anything, you can be anything, you can do anything, don't let anyone stop you, blah, 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 blah. And then I thought, oh, I'm not doing it. So how would they trust me? If I'm not doing it, I'm not really the role model I claim to be. So it took a bit of ego hit and a bit of courage. And in 2020, I left and I started my business in the June of that year.
So take me to the you making that decision to walk out the door, because I think those moments of almost like lightning bolts of energy towards I have to do something new, they're so powerful and they can push us forward, but then inevitably there's that other voice that comes in that's like, oh, how are you going to make money? What's going to happen to this bill that has to come in? Oh, I wanted to take a holiday at that time of life, let's all assume that holidays weren't happening for anybody. But that aside, that's, we can push that out of our minds for now. But, there's so much of that, okay, like what am I actually, like what is this actually going to look like in balance with that positive energy towards, yay, I'm going to make something. What were some of the moments that made you doubt, or the fears that you had, or the things that were in the way that you needed to work through to get to that stage of launching a business?
Funnily enough, I was very, very fortunate that I was already working with a coach when I just started to make this decision to leave. And initially it was fear of what if it doesn't work out? And the coach that I had at the time said to me, well, okay, let's go down this path. What if it doesn't work out? What's your worst case scenario? And it was very early on that I actually thought, oh, my worst case scenario is that I end up right back here. Like I'm already living my worst case scenario. I'm already frustrated. I'm already not feeling lit up. I'm already counting down minutes. You know that feeling when you're like crossing every calendar day off. And on Sunday, you're like, oh, here we go again, Monday. And it feels like this push uphill. And I thought, if it doesn't work out, I'd literally just get another job teaching. There's such a shortage. I'm never going to be without work as a teacher. And that was my moment where I thought, oh, actually, that's not a problem now. And then for me, the big block for the business, all the business stuff was actually my money stories. I had some serious money stories. I was like, but I don't want to be salesy, but I'm not materialistic. I don't care about money, and money is the root of all evil. So how could I possibly show up and sell things? And there was actually a lot of that I had to do to really get out of my own way. It was a lot of money work because once I'd established that my worst case scenario is right back here, I felt like pretty motivated just to get going.
I am so glad you're taking us there. I think money stories are something that surprises so many of us as entrepreneurs, how they play out. And it's like sometimes I think it happens when you actually have something that you need to sell. And then sometimes it happens when you're just thinking about, okay, like how much do I need to live versus how much do I want, and doing that budgetary work, in the early days to be like, how long do I have, quote unquote, in order to make this business a success? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 6 weeks? Did you have to work through your money story, particularly around selling as you were selling, or did you do some work before and then go into the sell?
It was a little bit of both. I'm a huge advocate for rewire the stuff while you're taking action. So I was doing it afraid, doing it icky, doing it ugly, doing it in this way that didn't feel great. And at the same time, I was looking at role models because, again, it was like, find evidence to disprove this story. I'd found a narrative that people who want money are greedy and materialistic and all of these bad things, that car salesman thing that we've probably all got to some level in our head. And I thought, okay, let's just disprove this. So I found all of these examples of these beautiful entrepreneurs who I thought were doing great things with the world. I looked at Oprah as an example of someone who has amassed all this money and then gone on and built schools. And, one of my dreams is to actually build a school one day. And I thought there's so much that I can do with money. And so I was looking for evidence and finding evidence while I was showing up and selling and feeling a little, still doing it. Looking back, I think about the first few quote sales calls that I had where I didn't really want to talk about money at all. So when they'd say how much, I was like, oh, that moment where like, it's this amount, but I can do this and I can do that. And you just don't hold any power. And I look back and think they were pretty terrible, but I was doing it anyway. And at the same time, looking to what I would say are mentors for people who have great hearts and big bank accounts.
Expanders are just one of my favorite things in this gig. And it's like they can be as incredibly impressive as Oprah, or maybe a few people that are just a few steps ahead of you and doing it in a way in which feels really positive. I love that for so many reasons. But I love also that you just showed up and sold icky. Like that is the perfect explanation. I still feel that way when I get into a call, and I'm like, fuck, here we go. Like, I know the value. I know how to make you care about why this is really important. I get all that. But then when you have to say the price, it's just so natural for so many of us to feel the ick and then be like, well, how else are we going to get there? Like, how are we going to feel unicky? Because there's just literally no way. I mean, it's not like we stood up and then went, oh, cool. I'm walking so confidently and freely. We just don't remember that, obviously. But there's so many things that we have to do for the first time that don't feel good. I think that's really powerful. Breanna, did you have a need or a space in which you then as an individual had to upskill beyond, learning your money story and working through that, beyond those aspects? Did you have to do re-education for this business?
I absolutely did. But I also think looking back again, hindsight's 2020, I think I also had a bit of an ego that I didn't need to, because when I was like, I'm a journalist and I'm an English teacher and I can write and I can do all these things. I can create the podcast and the landing page and the sales page and the content. I've done this. I'm good. And looking back again, I'm like, oh God, it was so bad. It was so, so bad. The skill set is actually so different. And I was so used to writing things as an English teacher, a literature teacher. It doesn't cross over. So I was probably overly confident, and looking back, it was just ignorance. But that also kind of helped me because I was just doing it. I was just doing the thing and looking back going, oh, actually, there's more to this. And looking back, I definitely had to learn, and still am, to be quite honest. I am still learning the skill set of being a CEO, of being the business owner, because I can be the teacher, I can be the coach, I can be the content creator. That feels natural and fun to me. But looking at spreadsheets and data and the balance sheets and the profit and loss and organizing the team, project management, the real sort of, I want to say, masculine elements to business, for want of a better word, I'm still building that skill. And that's something that it feels more difficult to me, because I started my business not because I wanted to be a business owner. I started my business because I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. And it was sort of like, well, choose your hard. I want to be a teacher and a coach, but now I'm going to have to learn this skill set of being a business owner. And so that is a honest work in progress every damn day.
Oh, but I would take that approach over the alternative every day of the week. I look at people who are building a business, they see like they're business builders, as in they see an opportunity or they see a trend or they see, something, they think of a thing that's going to make them money and is going to make a business, but there's no heart and rage behind it, or there's, maybe not quite as much detailed knowledge on the topic, but the spreadsheets is good. And, the forecasting done well, the networking, the structure, the project management, the process is all really, really good. I look at that and I think, gosh, more power to you, but I don't think I could ever be you. I have to have a bit of heart and rage behind something, and then I can figure out the rest later. There's definitely an aspect to that where it's like that ignorance actually really does help you because there's something bigger driving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's sort of similar to I've had a few friends say to me, these are mum friends, and they say, business is kind of like having a baby. If you knew how hard it was in the beginning, you might not do it. And I don't have children yet, but I think, yeah, I just came into business quite blissfully ignorant. And now I'm like, gee whiz, it really is hard. But I'm so glad, like you, that I've got the heart and the rage because, and that's why I found I was having this conversation just this week with a friend. I don't necessarily resonate with the word entrepreneur. And, people have said to me, oh, is that a block? Is that a mindset block? And I'm like, no, I don't think it is. To me, an entrepreneur is what you just mentioned, someone who sees an opportunity to build a profitable business and goes, oh, yes. And that's their passion. Their passion is building the business. I'm not an entrepreneur per se. I'm a teacher. And because of that, I've had to learn to be a business owner and a CEO, but it's not necessarily out of the love for entrepreneurship.
I understand that. And I think you're, like everybody, at a position of annoying bias with that, because what gets projected to us as well so often as the picture of an entrepreneur is Sam Altman, is a lot of men, a lot of people who have high ambition, and it's the business. It doesn't matter what the idea is. I think that's been a projection of entrepreneurship, and particularly in spaces like LinkedIn over the years, or just those people that gets put in lights. And I think almost taking ownership back of the word entrepreneur in a way that works for you, like it's just a word. Like
Yeah.
there's all of us can take ownership of the space of doing the act of entrepreneurship, however that looks to us, and own that. Own the position of being a business owner, a business builder, a CEO, a leader, a founder, like whatever the word is. Looking at that like bias that gets attached to it, and be like, where did I pick that up from? Where is that coming from? It's much like the money story. How can we put that to the side to just be the person that we're capable of being, and building the thing that we want to build, and owning whatever we have to within that? I find I get hung up. You can probably hear it in my voice. I get hung up on the term entrepreneurship and this thought so much as well, because I speak to so many of us who are struggling with stepping into this identity because of how it's been projected, and because of how it's been projected, how potentially other people will feel if you start self-identifying publicly as an entrepreneur. And it's like, well, it's just, it's like being like, I mean, I make a joke about unemployed. It's just that we're not employed by other people. We're like
Mm.
disemployed from an employer. It's like we're doing our own thing, we can make words work for us as we have to.
So true. And I always called it fun employed. I remember when I left, everyone was like, so what are you doing next? What are you doing now? I was like, I don't know. I'm just going to be fun employed. And now I resonate with what you just said. I've really had to do a lot of work around the CEO word, and even a leader, because, as I started to hire a team and I had other coaches working with me, and even, my admin team and my production team, then I was like, oh shit, I need to step into the leader identity. I need to be a real adult now. And I actually had to do a lot of work around that, because I had stories like, but you're not the leader. And the more I really stepped into that, the more I loved leadership.
Leadership is such an empowering space. And I want to get into that with you a little bit, but I want to do it through the lens of how Mind School might have looked, in those early days for you, when you were figuring out what it was and how it was going to grow and what it was going to serve, who it was going to serve, what it was going to build. And then the Mind School of today that has a team behind it. Tell me that story. How do they look different from then to now?
Oh, so different. My business has gone through so many iterations, and I look back and think I'm just so glad I was willing to do things and suck and do things and realize, oh, this still isn't it, and when you've got a decade of going, oh, this still isn't it, this still isn't it, I kind of continued that in the business. So I started actually, and I was the school mum. That it wasn't even the Mind School. My business was called the School Mum, and that was just a joke, because some of my students used to say to me, "You're like our school mum," and that honestly pissed me off, because I was like, "I'm too young to be your mum. I'm only a few years older than you at the time," and so they called me that even more. And I started the business as the school mum. I was a mindset coach for teenage girls, and I was doing a lot of work with high schools, and I was working with them. Then I realized that I can go so far with the kids, but if they go home to relearn the behaviors, the cognitive behaviors, the patterns, all of it. If they go home and relearn things like bashing themselves when they look in the mirror, things like comparing themselves to all the other girls in the classroom, things like overachieving anxiety. Like I could do so much, but then I realized sometimes it was the mothers that needed support. So my business moved into supporting women, and it was all online. It really was. The first iteration of the Mind School was my signature program that I taught online. And after, I feel like COVID, everyone was like, yes, we get to do this online business thing, and there's going to be so much freedom, and it's going to be amazing. And so I went from being in a classroom. I had 200 students every day that would come in and out of my classroom door. I loved being in that environment. I had my colleagues, I had the staff room, staff parties, Christmas carols with the kids. I had this really like a community full of people around me. And I went from that to a fully online business at home in my office alone. And I didn't realize, honestly, until about a year ago, that I had actually gotten really lonely. And it was like the boiling frog in the water that doesn't know that they're boiling. And I was chatting to my husband about it, and he said, I don't know how you're such a people person. You're such a people person. This would be killing your soul. And I was like, oh, you're so right. You're so right. But I'd built this online business. And so about a year ago, I made the illogical business decision that made no financial sense and isn't as scalable and doesn't tick all the business boxes, but it ticked the soul boxes. And I moved everything to in person, and I capped the numbers. I was used to running, scalable one-to-many offers online. I could take 50, 60 people into a course, and it was far more scalable. People could reach me all over the world. And then I went, actually, I'm taking 20 people at a time, and I'm doing it 2 or 3 times a year because my soul needs to be in a classroom again. And I actually truly believe that we learn better in that immersive experience. And so a year ago, I launched the Mind School as it is now, and it's truly the best thing that I ever did for my soul.
I absolutely love that iteration, and just talking about how, we constantly shift through the pivots of this isn't it, but I don't know why this isn't it, but logically this should be it, but this is actually really frustrating me. There's just so much insight there that I think we all can connect with. Like I definitely connect with, how often that changes. How did it change your marketing ick, the selling ick, being able to sell it and fill rooms, and there's a certain, call it out, there's a certain safety in doing things digitally. I know I definitely feel that in models in my business that I'm exploring at the moment, where I can safely like put a resource out and then just be like, don't look at me, let me hide. Or even in a digital realm, like, you don't have that kind of like fear of being like, what if no one shows up? What if nobody buys this? Like there's a certain safety element to working digitally as well that, maybe doesn't translate so much to the in-person. But that aside, that's just a very Kimism on that space. That aside, how has it changed your marketing and your ability to fill a room digitally or otherwise?
I actually think, to be quite honest, it's worked in my favor. And this is quite an interesting conversation that I've been having with a lot of business friends, where it does really feel like people went, like I said, so heavily online. And even the clients that we serve, they got so used to Zoom. But I'm really noticing, and a lot of the people who have come into the school in person have said, the reason that I came in to the Mind School was because it was in person, because people have Zoom fatigue. I think so many people are like, I don't want one more Zoom situation sitting at my laptop. So that actually worked really well for me. I really got so much feedback that a lot of people were saying, I actually am craving in person again. And because my soul was so behind it in the marketing, and I was so lit up, so excited, so I could not wait to get back in front of a whiteboard and have students in front of me. I think my excitement and my passion really bled through into my marketing. And because I was so energetically behind it, I really feel like that worked for me.
That makes a lot of sense. I think, yeah, so many of us are, whilst we might fight it, like we might fight that, oh, do I have to go out and be like, put a bra on and like be a human being and do all those things. Sorry. So yeah, actually having to go out and be in front of people, like it feels like a mountain, but when we do, the reward is so much more impactful and empowering. And it's interesting that it's brought you back to something that you thought you had left behind. I think that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, business builders, CEOs, founders, all of us. We tend to bring in aspects of who we were into what we create, but it's like we only go through a process of shedding everything that was before to be able to come back to the stuff that you're like, oh, actually, there was a thread of this the whole time. And now that it's landed, I feel really safe and happy.
That is so true. So true. And I remember thinking, I'm not leaving teaching because I don't like teaching. I'm leaving teaching because I miss teaching. And so I had that awareness when I was leaving, and I thought, I'll just build a business where I actually get to teach and I'm not doing admin. Funnily enough, I was like, I'll do something where I don't feel like a glorified admin assistant. And then, some days on my CEO days, I'm like, damn it, I'm still the admin girl. But like you said, I would choose it every single day.
Yeah, the admin person is just so much of what we do all day, every day. I know it's like I'm thinking about now all the emails and things I haven't gotten back to, being like, yep, cool, definitely ignoring that part of my life right now. Very good. Now, coaching I find an interesting space, and the listener who's been with me for a long time will know this. I'm not backwards and coming forwards, that there are some industries that are heavily unregulated and there's some bad players within. And I do my very best to have the positive players on this podcast to ensure that we never get stuck into, income flexing or big promises or, high value, no reward, all of that stuff that comes with an unregulated industry, not dissimilar to podcasting in a lot of ways. But, it is a widely unregulated space. So that's a challenge for everyone to work in, particularly those like yourself who have really positive intentions and really positive plans and ways that you deliver and ethics around that as well. How has the fact that it is unregulated as an industry affected like what you create and how you sell it? How has it affected you as a business owner?
I'm so glad you brought this in, because I've had to go through a whole journey with this conversation. I didn't actually like the word coach myself, and I had to do a lot of work around it, like you'd mentioned. I absolutely understand that this is one of the, I guess this is what unfortunately a lot of people project onto the coaching industry, because there are, like you said, unfortunately there is just that, and people have been burned. And so when I created the curriculum for the Mind School, such a huge part of it is based around ethics, the ethics of coaching, the ethics of money, and not all money is good money, the ethics around embodiment. So we do a lot of work around teaching that you only coach on the things that you have embodied and do it in a really ethical way. It has impacted, for example, I don't think I've ever got as much trolling as I have in the last maybe 6 months. We started running some Facebook ads and it was just like, oh, scammer, MLM, like all of that.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's made me so much stronger, because I've had to really find my conviction and my integrity within the space. And I can sleep so solid at night knowing that the coaches I produce from the Mind School are so ethical and so embodied, and I am too. And so I think that in an unregulated space where that that's the public perception sometimes, it actually holds you to a personal higher standard, or at least that's what it's done for me. It's made me almost hyper vigilant, because I know that that's what people may be looking for. And so I've almost swung the opposite way to hold myself to such a high standard, and created a course where ethics is one of the main priorities.
I'd love to hear that. And I'm sorry that you had that trolling experience. I just think the internet has lost their freaking marbles with so many things, like this binary feedback, or this, this binary brush that we paint other people with when we see things. Like, we forget that marketing is about hooking someone with an interesting thing that makes them stop the scroll. Like, it's not the whole story. You gotta have a little bit of context. You gotta have a little bit of consideration to the entire story, and you have to look into things, and establish, like, just imagine if, we painted all doctors are bad from that, like Dr. Death or whatever, it is, there is a context needs to be applied to so many circumstances. And I do believe that your industry is one that really, is getting painted really, really broadly. There's definitely some dodgy players out there, like there are in every single industry, but it's getting painted really broadly and getting used as a little bit of a scapegoat for some things. And I find it a really challenging experience, because what it inevitably is going to do those bad players, what they're inevitably going to do is give this contextual brush to everything, which is going to actually hold some individuals back. I know it's held me back. I know the course pushback, the quote unquote course, oh, another bloody course, that has held me back from creating something that I know will help a lot of people feel really confident in starting a podcast that has a business and a brand benefit or comes from a brand voice. And so I haven't created that thing yet because I
Mm,
struggle so much with I don't want to sell a course because I feel like it, and so that's a very personal, aspect to share. I'm sure
mm,
there's plenty of people who've been like, I don't want to step out as a coach because the word coach has connotations to this, and this, much the same way that like course does. And, that's such a shame because, if anything, the biggest shame in any of our entrepreneurial careers is to hold ourselves back from creating something or doing something that we want to do because of perception and perceived perception of things. It's such a shame.
And I hear that all the time, especially around the coach word, and probably more regularly, more recently, the course thing. Like you
Yeah.
said, it's like, oh, another course, I roll. And I always say to those people, well, hey, like you said, find a word that suits you. Find a word that you don't. I still, when people say, "What do you do? Who are you?" It's like, well, I'm a teacher. I'm a learner. I'm a course creator. I'm all these things, but you have to choose the meaning that works for you. And if you don't want to call yourself a coach, don't call yourself a mentor. Call yourself a guide. Call yourself a teacher. That's mainly my archetype that I resonate with. I'm a teacher at the bottom of all things. And I just agree with you. It's really tough that the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the oil, So it's the one or two bad coaches out there, so to speak, that are creating a really negative perception, and you've just got to be the light.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to try and ignore the trolls because they are out there for everybody in everything at some stage. It's so easy to make an opinion on what others are doing. But unless you're, as Breanna Brown says, unless you're in that arena, pop down, it's none of your business.
Mm, mm.
What has been the most foundational shift that you've experienced in your business for yourself as the human behind it?
I think it is the understanding and the evidence that there's nothing I can't learn. And because there's nothing I can't learn, there's nothing I can't achieve. And I think that's been foundational as a business owner, because whether it's that the algorithm changes or there's a new way to do things or some new tool, skill set, whatever, having that growth mindset, ultimately, that's what it is. It's like, well, I can learn it and therefore I can do it. And if I can't do it yet, it's just a skill set. And all skill sets can be learned. And I really think that changed so much for me, because rather than being like, oh, I can't do that, I'm not going to try. Oh, I can't do that. I'm not a numbers person. Oh, I can't do that. I'm not a business person. I don't have a business background. I'm not that person yet, but just give me YouTube. Give me YouTube and some podcasts and some books and I'll figure it out.
Absolutely. I mean, just what we can learn, like the shit that I've managed to learn through this period. It's like, how do I even know what that is? Like,
Yeah.
what even is that? You're right. We can't doubt our ability, and that's a real challenge with those of us who are quite impatient and we want to see the business grow, or we're financially impatient, because that's a really big reality, particularly for people over the last 12 months. And I could say that confidently for the person who's going to listen to this podcast in 12 months' time, it's probably still the same thing. Financial pressure is always there and it's always hard. And, you want to create something, but you need to get paid. And all of those elements are like, oh, I know I can learn this, but like, how long is this actually going to take? And what can I sell in the meantime? What can I do to bring in my financial support in the meantime to make it happen? But we can do it. And it is just a patience thing.
Also, something I really want to add there is, because this is something that comes up with ethics, right? And I say to my aspiring coaches, what can happen because you do have that financial pressure and that financial scarcity that is legit. We need to pay our bills. And sometimes that scarcity, if we're not clocking it, can be the thing that creates some shady behavior. Taking on the client that you can't actually serve and maybe needs to be referred because you actually need the money. And putting a course out there that you probably didn't put that much effort into and you don't feel proud of because, like you said, you need the money, and that's legitimate. There's the reality of finances behind business. However, that's what creates some unethical and shady behavior. And so the best thing I ever did for my business was to have a part-time job. And I had a part-time job up until I was doing multi six figures for quite a while. And that really took away that scarce, like, oh, I better chuck it out there, say yes to everyone, do things from this place that didn't feel good. And I say to anyone who's starting a business and is in that place of, I need to pay bills, I'm feeling really scared, there is no shame in getting a part-time job. It takes away so much of that behavior, and it really allows you to breathe and exhale and build a business that you're proud of, and that money feels good to receive because you feel good about who you've been in creating it. And so I will say to any business owner, because I felt like there was a lot of shame to the business owner who got a job. There were a lot of people who were like, oh gosh, I'm getting a job, it means I've failed in business, or I'm getting a job, this means I'm not cut out for it. Or, it feels like there's a narrative around how having a job means that you haven't made it. And I don't think anything could be further from the truth. I think that having a part-time job is the ultimate way of growing your business income in the long term in a way that feels good.
My head's going to nod off. Like, my head is going to leave its shoulders because it's nodding so hard. Like, I am so glad you brought this up because I couldn't agree more. This perception that gets rallied out to people that what business owners look like, these people who go all in and then they build and then they're, wow, it's happening. And it's just, there's no positive projections of the people who have held a part-time job or held a contract or a consultancy or like whatever it is. But it doesn't take away from your business in any way. In fact, it adds to it, and arguably it makes it. It is like the thing, like particularly if it's giving you skills that you can leverage into the business. And I don't necessarily mean taking a part-time job that's exactly like the business that you're building. But even if that part-time job is in retail or hospitality, but the business that you're doing is completely separate to that, as consulting or something, the people skills, the structure, the processes, that like there's nothing about any of the work that we do, employed, unemployed, or otherwise, that doesn't make our businesses great.
Totally agree. I think that having a part-time job, I'm the same. My head will nod off. It not only increases your skill set, it expands what I've found, it expanded my mental capacity for my business too. Because what I also, even today, if I don't have the discipline to go and do things outside of my business, whether that is a part-time job where I'm doing something completely irrelevant or going for a swim or going to dance class or something like that, business owners can get so in their head and can fall into the trap of sitting at their laptop 24/7, and then things feel worse, and then their productivity drops and their creativity goes downwards. And I think a part-time job, especially if it's one of those, for want of a better word, like mind-numbing, repetitive tasks, something just completely unrelated to business, I actually think not only does it take the financial pressure away, it increases your creative capacity, it increases your mental capacity, it takes you away from your business so that you're not so in it. And when we're so in it, I think that that's not a recipe for success either. So I just think, honestly, I'm such a proponent for a part-time job.
Oh, I couldn't love that more. And I'm so glad we went there because I think there's definitely someone who needs to hear that and who needs to take it on and take some action in that space. So thank you for sharing it. Where do you want your business to grow to now? Like, what's on your roadmap? What's your new vision for it?
This is a really tough question to answer at the moment, Kim, because I've been, keeping it real, and the realities of being a CEO and a founder, and behind the scenes, I've been going through a pretty tumultuous fertility journey. And so the last year, at least nearly 2 years, while I've been building my business, I've had this niggling reality in the back of my head, and hope, really hope. Oh, well, maybe I won't launch that because I'll be pregnant. And maybe I won't launch that because I'll be pregnant. And that's been going on for so long. And so it has been really challenging as a business owner to keep going and planning and growing the thing and holding all that while holding the fertility balls and needing to plan, but also not having any certainty. It's been a lot. And so I've got big dreams for my business, and that will just, we'll go all over Australia doing the Mind School and ultimately keep doing that, maybe doing it 4 times a year all over Australia and then the world. And also I just dream of also doing that with a baby. And so I have to just take each month as it comes at the moment. And build and plan the business and be adaptable at the same time.
Oh, the unknown future of if this happens plays such a big role in so many of our businesses, whether it be, as you've just so generously shared, related to a fertility journey
Mm.
or related to a huge foundational contract for someone that would change other things that they would do, or, a new business partner or the right employee, or, any of those things, or even, living in a different location. Like there's just so many things. And I think, you have such an excellent perspective there on knowing that that's something that's potentially limiting, and being able to go, okay, well, what action can I still take, knowing that if and when something changes, I can change with it at the same time. That's it's a really generous share from you.
Thank you. I think adaptability is probably one of the best skills that I've learned we can have as a business owner, is just to be so adaptable. And boy, have I been given that lesson the last couple years. But yeah, like you said, just planning as though things aren't going to change, and knowing that I can change and evolve and adapt when it does.
Well, for the current vision for the Mind School, and as a thank you in return for sharing your story so generously, your insights so generously, and encouraging me and the business owner listening to keep going and keep showing up, how in return can we support you to grow right now?
I would say the Mind School podcast is a really great place to start. That's where I rant and rave and get all of my rage and passion out. There's a lot of ranty, ravey passion there. And the Mind School, we are launching to open the doors for 2025 very soon. It sold out really quickly this year all over Australia. So that you would just have to follow along on Instagram for when we open up for March 2025. And hopefully I'm manifesting that's going to be the Mind School where my students will, rub my belly and we'll all manifest great things for 2025 together.
Group manifestation. I am all here for it. And I will absolutely put the link to your podcast in the show notes. So listen, you can look down on your phone, have a look at it. For those who have a podcast, you should know that the best place to get listeners to your podcast is to talk about it in other podcasts. So that's my marketing tip for anybody who has a podcast. Look at your opportunity to get on others. It is the most logical place to be able to go from one thing to another, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. So I'm going to absolutely make sure that the link is in the show notes. I'm going to absolutely give it a listen as well, because if it is if it's half of what you shared with me today, I'm sure I'm going to find some motivation myself in there.
Thank you so much, Kim. And thank you for this podcast. Truly, I listened to it this morning and I really mean it when I say this is what every business owner needs at every level, not just at the start.
Oh, I so appreciate that. Thank you. This is what I'm here to do. Keeps me going, keeps my heart and my rage alive. It has been a pleasure to chat with you today. Thank you for spending the time with me.
No problem.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.